Aerolight 795 DI2 routing assembly. To be able to assemble DI2 routing, there must be no accessories on the frame. Refer to the Aerolight 795 DI2 mechanical routing disassembly video. To avoid cutting the battery harness, we recommend cutting the seat tube before starting any assembly operations. See the Cutting the Seat Tube to Height paragraph in the ePost 2 instructions. Slide a magnetized wire into the seat tube and extract it through the opening inside the bottom bracket. Fix the battery harness, 900 mm, to the end of the magnetized wire on the seat tube side and extract it through the opening inside the bottom bracket. Fix the harness to the tube so that it does not fall inside. Slide a magnetized wire into the down tube through the cap opening and extract it through the opening inside the bottom bracket. Fix the connecting harness, 1000 mm, to the end of the magnetized wire on the cap side and extract it through the opening inside the bottom bracket. Slide a magnetized wire into the bottom of the seat tube through the removable stop location and extract it through the opening inside the bottom bracket. Fix the front derailleur harness, 300 mm, to the end of the magnetized wire on the stop side and extract it through the opening inside the bottom bracket. Slide a magnetized wire into the right chain stay and extract it through the opening inside the bottom bracket. Tie the rear derailleur harness, 700 mm, to the end of the magnetized wire and extract it through the opening inside the bottom bracket. Insert the shifter harnesses through the lower holes in the head tube and extract them through the cap opening. Check that they slide well and remove the length stickers. Grease and place the upper bearing, 1 1/8 inch, into the left and right bearing thrust rings and position the assembly above the head tube with the flat face towards the front. Position the shifter harnesses in the lower slots of the bearing thrust rings. Insert the assembly into the head tube, starting by pressing the rear part whilst tipping the pressure towards the front. Check that the harnesses slide. If they do not, restart the operation. Feed the front derailleur cable guide tube, original fitting in the mechanical version, through the removable stop location under the steerer and extract it through the bottom of the head tube. If there is no cable guide, use a magnetized wire. Feed a brake cable through the left upper head tube hole, as seen from the front, hole number 1 in diagram, and extract it through the bottom of the head tube. Fix the cable to the cable guide tube or magnetized wire and extract the hole through the stop location. Insert a 4-pin drift to align the bearing thrust ring holes with those on the frame. Grease the inside of the lower head tube and the bearing thrust rings. Place the lower bearing, 1 1/2 inch, on the fork, flat part of the bearing downwards. Prepare the threaded insert subassembly with the steering cone and slide it onto the steerer tube up to the bearing after having inserted the fork into the frame. Position the fork perpendicular to the frame and insert the pin drift for easy alignment of the holes. Put the pin in place and position a second pin drift on the other end. This will form a shaft that will allow easy insertion of the pin. Insert the pin through the head tube. Check that it is well centered. It must not protrude from the threaded insert so as not to hinder tightening of the clamp ring. Apply 2 spots of weak thread lock, type Loctite 222, onto the clamp ring and screw it up without locking it for the moment. Insert both rubber head tube hole cover plugs. Insert the cable into the Jaguar rear brake cable outer. Grease the end and slide it into the down tube, guiding it gently by hand in the beginning. Extract the cable outer and remove the cable. Check that the cable outer slides well. Position the cable outer in the rear brake. Determine the cable outer length between the brake and the stop. The cable outer must not be in contact with the frame, must not be too far away, about 17 centimeters. Once the length has been determined, mark the cable outer where it comes out of the stop location. On the down tube, measure from the start of the L in look to the center of the K. Remove the cable outer from the down tube and transfer the length found from 5 centimeters from the mark made towards the stop. Identify this length with 2 spots and use pliers to clamp a collar on each spot. Clamp 3 other collars between the first 2, placing them non-linearly. Reinsert the cable outer into the tube up to the mark made nearest the stop. Slide on the removable cable guide stop and clamp it without forcing. Tighten the steering ring and adjust the headset so that no play remains and the fork can turn freely without stiff points. Connect the 4 harnesses inside the bottom bracket to the Shimano terminal strip and insert it into the down tube. Only the rear derailleur harness must enter the bottom bracket. Leave a minimum of 15 centimeters of harness protruding. Position the harness in one of the guide grooves. Insert the cylindrical parts into the locations provided in the bottom bracket. Position the guide clamp and tighten both screws to 3 Newton meters with thread lock. Put the rear wheel in place and use a 4 mm Allen key to adjust the alignment of the brake blocks on the braking strip, complying with 0.5 mm spacing between the rear of the brake blocks and the braking strip. Connect the battery to the harness. Position 2 Shimano collars close to the battery. Engage the battery in the E-post 2 and insert the whole assembly into the seat tube. Tighten the E-post 2 to 2 Newton meters. Slide a brake cable outer into the stem using a cable for assistance if necessary. Leave the cable outer protruding about 50 centimeters towards the rear. Feed the cable outer into the stem continuation elastomer and position it behind the stem. Feed the cable outer into the steerer tube, taking care to pass it to the right of the pin, chain wheel side. Position the stem on the steerer tube. Check that there is good contact. Check that the cable outer slides well. Position the drums in the desired orientation. Tighten the stem to 15 Newton meters. Put the carbon covers in place and tighten them to 1 Newton meter. Make the cable outer protrude by 15 millimeters under the fork crown and position the cable outer perpendicular to the stem and cut it to 30 millimeters. Fit the handlebar according to recommendations. Application of liquid torque and screws tightened to 4 Newton meters. And position both brake levers shifters. If fitting a handlebar with external cable outers, position a cable outer along the handlebar from the brake lever or shifter and cut it 30 millimeters from the stem cap. If fitting a handlebar with internal cable outers, feed in the cable outer and cut it 20 millimeters from the stem cap. Slide a cable onto the handlebar cable outer after positioning it in the brake lever shifter and greasing and positioning a cable outer ferrule. Feed the cable into the quick release and then into the tension adjuster and position the assembly on the cable outer ferrule. Position a cable outer ferrule, slide the cable until it comes out under the fork crown and pre-position the quick release towards the cable outer along the handlebar without tensioning the cable. Check that the tension adjuster screw is at more than 1 millimeter. Take the elbow, insert the cable through the ferrule and insert the cable outer. Check that the cable guide plastic tube protrudes 1 to 2 millimeters from the elbow to avoid the risk of friction. Position the elbow in the steerer tube by pushing the elbow cable outer assembly inside the steerer and gently pulling the cable towards the exit from the stem. Check that the elbow is in a horizontal position and not inclined. Feed the cable into the fork opening. Position the cable outer in the quick release, checking that the latter is in closed position. Place the pull rod on the left lever and position the elbow in the pull rod. Optional. If you want to fit cable protection, cut the bellows to 23 mm. Slide the cable through the cut part and place it in contact on the pull rod. Feed the cable into the guide and position it on the right lever. Feed the cable into the cable clamp. Tension the cable by placing the top of the levers just above the fork. Tighten the cable clamp with a 3 mm bit to 6 Nm torque. Adjusting the front brake. For rims wider than 24 mm, remove the washer from both pad holders. The maximum width compatible with the aero brake is 2 to 28 mm. Put the wheel in place. Check that the quick release is still in the closed position and the springs in the relaxed position. Once the adjustment has been done, move the brake lever fully several times to put the cable and outer in place. Adjusting the brake block clearance. Insert a 3 Allen key into the upper lever hole and adjust the brake block clearance. Anti-clockwise rotation moves the brake block closer to the rim. Clockwise rotation moves the brake block away from the rim. Insert a 2 Allen key into the lever bottom holes, and if necessary, adjust the spring tension setting to make the lever movements symmetrical. Clockwise rotation tensions the spring, anti-clockwise rotation slackens it. Move the lever several times to check correct operation and adjust if necessary. Cut the cable about 2 cm from the cable clamp and crimp on a cable ferrule. Place the cable in the groove provided for it. Position the caps and tighten to 1 Nm. If necessary, adjust with the tension screw. Insert the rear brake cable guide into the hole in the head tube. Assembly of the rear brake cable outer onto the handlebar and fitting of the quick release are identical to those for the front brakes. Set the cable outer connection to length, checking that rotation of the fork is not hindered. Feed the cable into the rear derailleur cable guide and adjust according to the manufacturer's recommendations. Position the connector on the cap. Connect the harnesses to the connectors. Insert the harnesses into the horizontal tube. Position the cap on the frame. Pass the front derailleur harness into the DI2 ferrule and position it on the frame, tightening it to 1 Nm. Position the Shimano grommet on the ferrule. Use a flat screwdriver to position the harness covers on the rear of the right base and on the front of the head tube, as well as the whole cover plug. Fit the Z2 crankset. See Z2 crankset instructions or technical video.